You all would remember that last February, President von der Leyen and the entire College of Commissioners was in New Delhi. Those of you who follow EU and EU relations would know that this is normally not a done thing, and both in symbolic and substantive term, it had a lot of significance attached to it. In September, this was followed by a new India-EU strategic agenda. This is a very substantive, comprehensive, forward-looking, positive document. And again, it merits reading. And the 5 pillars which are listed out in this strategic agenda, one is technology and innovation, with a lot of elaboration done in that segment. Now, that is the context in which Secretary Krishnan is out here today. We have a Trade and Technology Council. EU has this Trade and Technology Council only with 2 countries. And for us also, it is an important mechanism in terms of engaging with the EU in technology domain. There are 3 pillars within it. One, of course, is trade related, but on the technology side, digital and critical technologies is what Secretary Krishnan and his ministry looks after. And that is what brings him out here to engage with the Commission, DG Connect in particular, who Director General is his counterpart, to undertake a discussion as to how we go forward, what more we do in this domain within the framework of the TTC and the new India-EU strategic agenda. India-EU summit is around the corner. You know, dates are being worked out, and what he discusses today and the discussions which happen would feed into that summit outcomes. So this is the broad context in which he is out here. The other context of his visit is that India would be hosting the AI summit. Now, all of us know AI's significance, its importance. It is sweeping across all the domains we can think of. It has its benefits, it has its potentials, but also has its challenges. So India would be hosting the AI summit, which would be held in February of next year. It would be a big summit. It would contribute to the developments which are taking place in the AI domain. And that again becomes a context of his visit and his conversations which would take place while he is out here. So let me conclude with this. You would be hearing from DG, from Secretary Krishnan after I finish. I would have loved to be while the panel discussion takes place, but I have a meeting with the cabinet of Madam Kaya Kalas. You know, there are interactions which would be taking place between her and my foreign minister. So which gives you just a sense that, you know, the pace and the momentum in India-EU relationship is, a lot is happening out there. The pace and momentum is fast. So I would be excusing myself from that, but I wish the panel discussion all the best, and do throw up ideas which I think feed into the formal channels and official channels of discussion. So let me conclude with these remarks, but I would like to thank ECDPM once again for collaborating with us and for all the support you have extended to the embassy team. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And thank you indeed to the Embassy of India for providing, for supporting in organizing this event, and particularly for providing the wonderful delicacies which you can stay on for after the event. But without further ado, I'd like to pass the microphone to Secretary S. Krishnan from the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology of India to give us a little bit to follow up on what the ambassador has mentioned in terms of both the TTC and the India AI Action Summit. Thank you.
I can see right to the back a little better, getting up here. Let me first thank the Embassy of India here in Brussels and the ECDPM for having hosted me this morning and my delegation. As was pointed out, we are here as part of the TTC process, specifically on the technology vertical, which has turned out to be probably the most vibrant of the three verticals that we have as part of this discussion, and to which we attach significant importance. We believe that technology is going to be very, very critical for growth and development, particularly in the global south, and India has potentially a leadership role there. And especially in the context of what is happening with technology globally now, with artificial intelligence and all that's happening in the semiconductors area, clearly there is a lot of coordinated action which is needed amongst different parts of the globe, particularly India and the European Union. Many of you would possibly be aware that India is one of those countries where the AI Stanford Index report ranked India as leading the world in terms of talent acquisition, in terms of penetration of AI talent amongst STEM students, and further in terms of skill penetration as well, it's second overall in the world. So there's significant human resource potential that India offers to the world in the space of AI. And what is even more interesting is the way that AI gets used in India. About almost 80% of Indian companies are currently using AI in productive areas, and about 65% are actually applying it. Enterprises, a broader group, are actually using it in the space of manufacturing, for instance. It's an interesting contrast from the way AI is being used in the rest of the world. It kind of almost inverts the numbers. In the rest of the world, almost 70% apparently is used largely for entertainment and other casual purposes, including cat videos. India tends to actually possibly do a little more in this area in terms of using it for productive enterprise. And that is truly what we are attempting to do through the India AI mission, which my ministry actually runs, and which has 7 interesting verticals. The whole purpose of that is to address some of the key areas within the how AI gets deployed in a country like India. And today it is serving as a model which is being advocated for the rest of the world as well. Particularly the World Bank, the Gates Foundation, and a number of other agencies are advocating what we have attempted to do as something that the world could potentially adopt. So what do we do under the India AI mission? If I can give you a quick overview. And the first and most critical pillar is the compute pillar. As we're all well aware, you need adequate compute facility for AI to really take off. And especially for resource-constrained economies, this could really be a challenge. We can't throw the kind of money after it, which some of the other countries or some of the other companies around the world either throw after it or claim to throw after it. And so the interesting thing there is that we've built a model which is based on government underwriting some of the demand for AI and subsidizing access for those who are in the space of research and innovation and students and small and medium enterprises. But it's built out by the private sector. Bit like the AI factories that the EU is attempting to build, and which we've been briefed about. We originally started out the mission in March of 24, assuming that over a 5-year period we will build out about 10,000 GPUs of capacity. But events overtake us. We've had 3 rounds of bidding, and already we've touched 38,000 GPUs worth of capacity. I mean, more rounds of bidding are to follow. We do it almost practically every 4 to 6 months as newer capacity comes on board. What we give the private companies an assurance is to actually use a portion of that capacity for what we need, and they can also sell it to others in need. In fact, the United Nations at some point asked us, saying, if we build enough capacity, would we be prepared to share with other countries in the global south? And we have indicated that once we have adequate capacity to meet the needs, then we would be able to meet the requirements of the global south as well. And the other part of the story is, given that India has a fairly large grid, electricity grid, and because of the various balancing factors within that large grid, we are also able to support a build out of data centers based on green power for the rest of the world. And some of you might have heard of Google's recent announcement of adding significantly to data center capacity in India. And the other part of the story, of course, is that Indian companies are also joining the race. TCS is planning to build out more data center and compute capacity in AI in India. So that is as far as the compute pillar is concerned. The second critical thing is AI models, large language or foundational models. Again, the story keeps evolving all the time. Initially, although we had intended to build out some models, there was a lot of hesitation. And many experts told us that it makes a lot more sense not to build models of our own, but to adopt open source models and build applications instead. Undoubtedly, applications are important, and I'll come to that presently. But then culture-specific models are also important. And especially for a large country like India with a multiplicity of languages, it's very important that we build models which are able to pick up data relating to all the languages and cultures in the country. And which is why we are now building out large models which will work for our overall situation. And in addition to that, because we are looking at application of the models in a way that would work in the Indian circumstance, in addition to a larger model, a larger foundation model, we are also building a lot of sector-specific small modules in say, healthcare, in research into critical materials, in research into various other areas where the contribution directly to productive enterprise is likely to be significantly larger. And we are hoping that by the time we hold the AI Impact Summit in February, we'd be able to launch the first of India's large models, and by that time it should be up and running. And a fair amount of work has been done in that area, and it's moving forward. The third important thing that you need, in addition to compute and models, is of course data. And that is one thing that India can always put together, a lot of data. And to enable that, we have set up a datasets platform. It's called the AI Kosh. And that's something which is rapidly growing. When I checked this morning, it was a little over 3,000 datasets which are there on that particular website, but that grows very fast. I remember I went to an event about 3 weeks ago in Delhi, and when I spoke, I said we have about 1,500 datasets on that platform. And my minister was speaking after me, so he quickly checked. And then he said, well, I need to correct my secretary. He said 1,500. Now we have more than 2,000. So that's how rapidly the numbers grow as far as data sets is concerned. The idea there is we have to have machine readable data sets which provide anonymized data, and governments generally tend to have a lot of this data. So use it in such a way that interests of data privacy are respected, and at the same time they're available for the kind of use that we need it for. So in addition to these three critical verticals, uh, the most important vertical in my view is the applications vertical. I think that is truly where India can make all that difference to the rest of the world as well. Applications are probably the space where we can actually add to what is happening globally in the AI space, because somebody has to create those applications and somebody has to deploy them. A number of Indian companies in the IT space are quickly pivoting around to this approach from the earlier approach, and they are quickly trying to make sure that they have retrained their resources to make sure that they are deployed in a way that makes a significant difference to the way that AI itself is used globally. And quite honestly, that's also ultimately the revenue opportunity that would arise for the private sector from the deployment of AI. And therefore, we see that as a significant opportunity, both for our companies and also a way in which we can serve the world. It's a bit like what happened during the Y2K moment about 25 years ago. So we are recreating some of that through application development across. And there are a number of interesting applications, and I would truly invite you to, when you come to Delhi for the India Impact Summit, the AI Impact Summit, you would probably be able to see some of the applications which have been developed and the way that they're being deployed. I think that will be a significant element of it. The other two or three pillars, one represents the pillar of funding for startups and innovation. And there it's very interesting that there's been a fair amount of collaboration with even EU and European countries. Um, we are collaborating with Station F in Paris, and we have sent startups to actually intern there, spend about 4 to 6 months there, pick up ropes and move on. Recently, I was pleasantly surprised. Brussels Hub, which is a startup ecosystem in Brussels. I met a representative in a global startup summit in the southern city of Coimbatore, which they were attending, and they've signed an MOU with Startup Tamil Nadu to actually establish a way in which they can relate. So it's very, very interesting to see how these relationships are also growing in the way that India and the EU are addressing this entire startup issue, and especially collaboration in the technology space. And in addition to startups, in addition to these particular areas that we are looking at, the other two or three areas which are critical for us in the overall area is skilling. And skilling is extremely critical because that's where both reskilling has to take place, and we need to support a large number of we need to support number of Indian students, and thank you, I'm good. So a number of Indian students who are currently in schools and colleges, also people who are working various jobs, make sure that they are able to pivot, make sure that they are able to be equipped. I did, of course, mention that skill penetration is amongst the highest, but given the size of India's cohorts and given the importance of skilling them into the future, it's important that AI skilling is taught to all students in schools, colleges, and universities, because it is a horizontal technology which everyone needs to use, and it's not just meant for those who are in that space. And our attempt through the skilling vertical is to look at job opportunities all the way up and down the line, from people who can actually build models, PhD scholars, and others who can build models, all the way down to those who can annotate data and supply it to these models. So there could be a number of job opportunities which are created, and especially in a multicultural environment like India, you have startups who actually pay bunches of women who just sit around and talk in their native tongue, native languages, because then that becomes a valuable data source which is used for building models and so on. So there are the kind of opportunities which get created in that space is very different, but skilling is another key vertical there. And lastly, the other key element is, of course, safe and trusted AI. That is something which concerns all of us. concerns you. Here in the EU, where you've taken an approach towards AI, you have the AI Act, you've led the rest of the world in what needs to be done. That's an experience we can learn from to figure out how we would do it in India the same way or differently. And that, again, is a key vertical where we are looking at various techno-legal ways in which we can address the challenges which AI poses. Figuring out, where there's AI-generated content, figuring out various technological means by which technology itself can be used to correct what happens in technology. So all of those become very critical and important areas that we are concerned with. And it's in this context, and it's an interesting approach which, for instance, our Prime Minister would like to take towards AI, because he strongly believes that technology is what will make India eventually a developed nation. There's a target that by the time we are in our 100th year of independence from colonial rule in 2047, we will become a developed nation. And the only way that would happen is by leveraging technology. And so that is the opportunity that he looks at, and which is why the summit, which is to be held in Delhi, is called the AI Impact Summit. We started all the way, some of you would recall, in November 2023. We started with the Bletchley Park Summit, which was on AI safety. We moved to AI action by the time we came to Paris this February, and now we are moving on to AI impact. And so that's the way we look at it. That's the opportunity that we see. And in this, in AI impact, I think the issues that we want to discuss, the 7 major themes that we want to discuss, would really resonate with an audience in the European Union. These are human capital. I talked about the importance of skilling and what human capital is required for this. Inclusion for social empowerment, which again is critical. Safe and trusted AI, we spoke about. Resilience, innovation, and efficiency. Resilience in terms of what it can do for the rest of the consumption of resources that we have in the country, in the world, whether it is energy or any of the other requirements that we have, and how do we use them most efficiently. Then science in itself, how can we do science better with AI so that we get faster developments and it pushes forward growth and development across the world. Democratizing access to AI resources, which would really resonate with many countries. The attempts to sort of ensure that resources get monopolized or get controlled. Undoubtedly, in certain cases, you have to prevent them from falling into wrong hands, but equally, you have to ensure that those who need access to it do have access to it, particularly the countries of the global south. And of course, AI for economic growth and social good, which is the overall positive aspect that we want to look at in AI. See, I can honestly tell you and share with this particular audience that in a country like India, there are many reasons why we can afford to be positive about AI. Simply because, unlike many other industrial revolutions in the past, which basically meant that manual labor was replaced by more productive ways of doing work, and most of it was human work, and it led to automation of various other kinds. For the first time with AI, it's intellectual effort which is going to get automated, and which is going to get, which won't need as many human brains as it did in the past. And so it's going to be office-oriented work, intellectual work, which is done out of offices like this, the kind of work that somebody like me does, which might get replaced fairly quickly, as opposed to other forms of it. And in a country like India, the number of people who do that kind of work as a proportion of the rest of the population is much, much smaller than it would be in much of the Western world. So we have less to fear. And that's one reason why we approach this with far greater positivity and far greater optimism, and truly as an opportunity that is presenting itself to a country like India to take things forward. And that is why it is called the Impact Summit, and which is why we believe that we need to work towards ensuring that it makes a significant difference, particularly in the productive sectors of economy. Whether you're talking about healthcare, whether we're talking about manufacturing, whether we're talking about education, whether we're talking even about climate and sustainability. In each of these areas, I believe that there's a lot that can be done, and there are many, many strategic opportunities which India and the EU should truly explore and take forward. First and foremost of it is, of course, research and innovation synergies. We would love to work with research institutions here in the EU to see how we can take this forward, joint projects which can be executed, ways in which we can work together in this space. Likewise, investment opportunities and market access. I already mentioned the kind of collaboration we're building with Station F, HEC, and even with Brussels Hub and others. Then focus on specific areas where societal impact would be the maximum. I illustrated some areas like healthcare, manufacturing, and so on. Look at how we can be more interoperable, which means that we need to work towards standards, common standards. I am aware that in the ISO framework, there is work happening towards common standards, and India is also contributing to it, as is the EU. And we really need to make sure that aspects of interoperability and standards are addressed carefully. And of course, the most important thing is what we do with human capital and the institutional partnerships which can be built. Of course, there have been some areas where there are concerns in the way that India and EU would look at it. I already pointed out we look at it from different standpoints. So the ethical dilemmas may be a little different. The concerns may be a little different, but and the regulatory framework which is being adopted in the two jurisdictions may also be a little different. You're coming at it a little harder than we are at present. But let me assure you, India's stance on regulation of AI is, although we want to give innovation a chance, it's not as if we stand behind on regulation if we are convinced that there is harm which is to come about. Most recently, we actually legislated, we issued a fresh set of rules on how labeling of synthetically generated content is to be done. This is something we were trying to get voluntary compliance from many of the players in the area. When that was not forthcoming, rules had to be made to sort of actually push that. The other element which could be very interesting is the way we deal with data itself and how data gets shared. Our framework, in the DPDP Act, the Digital Personal Data Protection Act, which is the rules for which have been finally approved and will come out shortly, is somewhere close to what GDPR does, but a little different from the way GDPR acts, and it sort of gives space for innovation and a way that companies can go forward in that. And of course, inclusion is an important thing, and I think enabling greater access to AI, not just and to digital resources, both in a country like India. We have 1 billion plus people who access the internet and who use smartphones in the country right now. So it's a huge market, but most of Indians access the internet through mobile connections, mobile data connections, whereas the rest of the world, most people access it through fixed broadband connections. So there has to be some way by which the infrastructure spreads in India as well. And likewise, in most of the global south and Africa and other parts of the world, we have to ensure that that infrastructure is made available and the digital divide gets bridged. And of course, finally, we need to work together to make sure that AI truly works in a trustworthy fashion and in a way that is secure. And that is something which we need to continue to collaborate on. So in each of these areas, my belief is that we can sort of collaborate. There's a lot of work which needs to be done. And as the ambassador was pointing out, the TTC, and especially in the technology vertical, there's a lot that India and the EU can do together. There's a reason why we are collaborating on this. This probably represents the third way in which AI is being approached globally. We represent another approach to this entire area, and there's a lot of identity of interest in the way that India and the EU can truly work in this space. And that's an opportunity we shouldn't let go of. And this is, again, a space where things change so rapidly. So we also need to move fairly quickly in the way that we collaborate and in the way that we take these initiatives forward. And that's really the mission that my ministry, the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, works on in India. And clearly it's a space that we would love to see how we can act in concert with the European Union and with other interlocutors that we. Thank you very much once again for hosting this event. I think it's extremely significant, and there's a lot of forward movement that can be made through interactions like this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary Krishnan, for introducing India's approach and for also laying out a little bit on the way forward in terms of EU-India AI cooperation, including some of the challenges as well as the opportunities. So I'm going to hand over now to my colleague Gautam Kamath, who will moderate the panel, and then we'll open the floor for a wider discussion, because I think there's a lot of expertise here in the room that we'd like to hear from.
Thank you, Chloe. Thank you, His Excellencies. Please, I would like to invite the panelists onto the floor. We have a very, very exciting panel, so please find your seats. I will swap this out so that. Yeah, please feel free. You can sit. So, thank you for being here. I have an extremely interesting panel because we have Juha Heikkilä from the European Commission, one of the senior most AI experts. We have Ms. Vidya Sampath from TCS, Senior Director based in Brussels. We also have Marta Psiwawa, if I got that correct. Thank you. She's the AI lead for SAP, which is one of the largest European companies. And then online we have Micah Okano-Hymans from the Klingendal Institute. Hi, Micah. Nice to see you. Great. So I think today's plan is basically to just look at the title of the event, which is now not on the screen, which is basically Emergence of Artificial Intelligence. What are the challenges and opportunities for India and the EU? The reason why we've curated this panel is because each one of our panelists are coming at this from a very unique perspective. I would sort of ask the panelists to keep their first statement very short so that we can get into the discussion. And I guess the prompt for all of you for this first round of statements is, first of all, what do you think are the main sort of areas where the EU and India can collaborate? Maybe reacting to the Secretary's speech, and then we can take another round of questions and discuss the challenges and opportunities. So with that, Juha, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Now? Yes, okay. Just a matter of switching it on. So thank you very much indeed. It's a great honor to be here in such an honorable company with Your Excellency, the Ambassador and Secretary. I'm delighted at this invitation to be able to speak and on behalf of the European Commission, the European AI Office, on the cooperation in this regard. So actually, a lot was said already, very insightful comments from both the Ambassador and the Secretary on the cooperation and the kinds of things that we share and where we can move forward. So in a way, a lot of the key points have already been made. But from our perspective, India is obviously one of the priority countries, and not just in AI, but in other fields as well. And this is demonstrated by this strategic agenda that the Ambassador mentioned, and also the Trade and Technology Council. We only have two of them, as was rightly pointed out. And this highlights the importance that we put to this cooperation. I think the underlying the supporting element there is what the Secretary mentioned, which is this commitment to advanced, trustworthy, and human-centric, safe, secure AI. This is certainly something that we consider to be very important, and we both feel that that is something where that's the foundation that we can work on. And of course, then the individual topics that are of interest to both of us and of mutual benefit, many of them were already mentioned, and we of course share those issues. So talent was mentioned, the great potential that India has, and the great opportunities that arise from cooperation in this area. We have actually activities planned in this regard, workshop to bring together to have the supply and demand of talent meet. So bringing together Indian organizations and European companies so they can discuss then how these two aspects could perhaps meet. And of course, other aspects which were also mentioned, safe and trusted AI. So we welcome very much the news, the recent setup of an AI safety institute in India. In the AI office, we have a unit which is dedicated to AI safety. We have very much interest in cooperating in this area because, as the Secretary mentioned, safe and trustworthy AI, that is something that is really quite important, and that is important to both of us. I was also delighted to hear about compute and the issues related to that. Of course, the AI factories, and indeed the model sounds very similar in many ways. This is something we feel is very important, the resources. So we have now recently put more and more emphasis, because we have moved with the AI Act into implementation phase. We are focusing more and more on the underlying infrastructure that is needed to develop AI, and we are also then supporting the adoption of AI. And of course, compute is here very important. So the AI factories and the future AI gigafactories, that is something that is indeed very important. And there we do feel that there is another contact point in terms of our cooperation. One thing that was from our perspective could be very interesting is also cooperation on aspects of AI for the public good. So this is one aspect that we're also addressing in the AI office. So we are talking about solutions, AI-based solutions to issues which are important in addressing solutions to problems that we face, like in healthcare, for example, in disaster management, severe weather incidents, and questions like that. So here, perhaps we could also have an interesting area of cooperation between the European Union and India. Another point, which I think is also quite important, which we want to emphasize, is the summit. So the summit is something that we really look forward to cooperating on and contributing to. We have been involved in all the summits, the European Union, starting from actually over Seoul and Paris, and we are very keen to work together with India and the organizers of the summit to make it a success. The 7 topical areas were mentioned. Those are all of high interest to us, of course, because we are involved in all those areas. So we do think very much that that is an opportunity for great cooperation. I think I'm running out of time, but maybe I'll just mention one more thing. There are many others that were mentioned. So as I said, a lot of ground was already covered. The support to smaller companies to work in this space. So this is very much now a focus for us in the Apply AI strategy, which we just published. So startups and SMEs, as the Secretary mentioned, these are the kinds of things that we feel are very important because of the shape and form of our AI ecosystem. And this applies, I think, in many ways to both of us. So this is an area certainly where we are putting more emphasis, and we feel that there is also a common interest there. We already started this with the AI Content Action Plan. So one of the goals of the AI factories is also to make it easier for smaller players to have access to computing capacity, because it is not necessarily so straightforward. So maybe I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
That was a fascinating list of issues, especially really connected with the AI for public good, because personally, I have worked on this for many years. I actually set up Facebook's Data for Good department, and we started with India because India had a lot of issues with natural disasters every year. So this is a very interesting area as well. I now want to move to Vidya. TCS actually is, just like SAP on the panel, one of those companies that are actually huge in both sides of the equation. So TCS has a massive presence all over Europe, and they're India's largest tech company. So it would be great to hear your thoughts on how to take this forward.
Thank you, Gautam. So good morning, everyone. First of all, please let me congratulate you for convening such an interesting discussion, and Secretary Krishnan for your inspiring words, and Ambassador, I think, who has just left. Also to the audience, my thanks, because I know it's a holiday weekend almost, so especially honored that, with your presence today. I indeed represent Tata Consultancy Services, and we are absolutely excited to be in this position today here, because we feel ourselves standing at the intersection of this enormous moment where India EU collaboration takes off in the tech space. Just a little bit about how we, with our activities here, can connect to some of the 7 points that Secretary Krishnan mentioned. So we have been here in Europe for about 3 decades now, in some countries a little bit longer, serving something like 350 plus of the largest companies in Europe, so across multiple sectors like telco, banking, insurance, manufacturing, etc. We work out of around 19 offices across the EU member states, and we have about 15,000 people here on the ground, with many hundreds of thousands people in other geographies supporting companies in Europe. The way we build up our ecosystem here is through a network of innovation centers called PACE. We call it PACE because we think innovation should happen at scale and at speed. And in Paris, in fact, our PACE Sport Center is dedicated to human-centric AI, with explainability, bias management, and putting humans in the loop as the main topics of research. And these PACE sports are typically places where we actually collaborate with finding state-of-the-art solutions for industry problems, working in an ecosystem of universities and startups. So this is our way of connecting to some of the things Mr. Hakila said and Secretary Krishnan said on where this collaboration can happen. I would also like to add how we engage with with industry, with our own safety framework for AI. We call it safety, standing for secure, accountable, fair, transparent, and identity preservation. So those are some of the aspects we find very important in how we deploy AI solutions for industry. And that is the learning that we would like to take forward also in this dialogue. We are focused on AI literacy tremendously. In the last 1 year or so, we have made about 580,000 people of our 600,000 odd colleagues educated on Gen AI. In Europe today, 70% of our workforce is up to speed on understanding and utilizing Gen AI. I could give a few more statistics, but you get the point. We are definitely seeing ourselves as a bridge, and for that reason, we are engaging heavily with the EU AI office. Mr. Hakila and we met with my CEO, Saptagiri. We met just this week with the EU AI office. Our intention is to engage deeply into the conversations on policy, to provide insights from industry, what we see happening on the ground, how AI is being deployed, to bring our knowledge on the social impact of frontier technology. So a colleague of mine spoke in the European Parliament just recently on what is now not yet part of the EU AI Act, but agentic AI, and how AI can be de-risked in that context. And so providing insights, providing our responses to the consultations. And I'm happy to, I'll end with this and perhaps go to my other points in the following questions. So we are also convening a kind of a dialogue on AI from a global lens. So in about a few weeks' time, 2 weeks' time, November 18th, TCS is collaborating with another well-known think tank in Brussels to have a day-long event on technology, and EU and India plays definitely a role in it. And we will have a session on AI from a global sense where Abhishek Singh, the head of AI mission, which Secretary Krishnan also spoke about, will be a speaker. There will be Yuha representing also the EU point of view. We hope to get in also voices from the US. So we hope to also in this way curate a dialogue where you can have a more global conversation on where the best frameworks for deployment of AI can take place. I'll leave it at that now.
Sure. No, thanks a lot. There's a lot of good points to sort of come back to, especially on the agentic AI front. But with that, we'll give an opportunity for Marta to put your view, and also the fact that SAP is one of the largest European players with a footprint in India. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on how this should move forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Your Excellency, Gautam, Chloe, thank you for invitation, and thank you for being here. Maybe first of all, I will present why SAP is here. You mentioned it a bit, and why we are very much involved in this discussion about EU-Indian collaboration. So SAP, first of all, is a European company, a German headquartered company, but with a global footprint. We operate across borders in many different locations, including in India. We are a leader in enterprise software and cloud with business AI, because AI is embedded across our portfolio. We integrate AI solutions to enable different organizations to evolve into more intelligent enterprises. That is why we support all kinds of policies that enhance adoption of AI across different sectors, be it in the government or in different industries. So this is exactly what Secretary Krishnan was, what Yuha mentioned, specific applications in different businesses, in different sectors. We are, obviously it's our business model. So SAP is strongly committed to digital transformation and growth stories of our customers. Again, be it in Europe, in India, or elsewhere. And we see our company playing a key role in the emerging innovation ecosystem, also in artificial intelligence and cloud and edge, to support critical public services delivery, manufacturing, climate actions, energy security, supply chain management. So also many of these critical sectors mentioned in European Commission Action Plan, in the Apply strategy, and also of the focus of the Indian government. And second, India. SAP has a very important Indian footprint. We have 5 locations in India, and SAP Labs India is the fastest growing subsidiary of our company, which drives product strategy, builds core solutions across the whole portfolio of SAP. That is why India is a very important market for us, also because of the factors that were mentioned already. Human capital, skills base, energy potential for data centers, and so on. And from this place, I would like to deeply appreciate the governments of India continued support and encouragement while we advance the digital transformation of thousands of organizations in India. But also, this is not surprising that given our presence in India as an ICT service provider and employer, the impact of digital policies on our company, and not only on our company, is double-edged. Any change in policies and regulations can impact SAP as a company, but also from a product perspective. And that is why we are actively engaged in EU-India collaboration and discussions on free trade agreements with this digital vertical, digital component. We lead digital committees in Federation of European Business in India and also in the German Chamber of Commerce. And maybe a couple of numbers to show you that this relationship is not only of SAP's interest. The report on considerations for an India-EU digital trade framework supported by SAP India shows that in 2023 the EU was 12%, over 12% of the India's total trade. More than 6,000 European companies are already active in India, and combined digital consumer base is almost 2 billion. This is a very important market. I mean, both markets. For India, the EU is very important, and for the EU, India is very important. The same for the companies in both regions. So obviously, we do support the collaboration to lower the entry-level thresholds for technology firms. So Indian and European users can access a large portfolio of best of class digital products and solutions. And there are plenty of opportunities in these discussions between EU and India. We mentioned several acts, GDPR, also Digital Personal Data Protection Act. There are things that we can discuss about. We can find maybe some mutual recognition agreements. We can find common standards that would also ease the access market access to the companies. Maybe I will mention data flows and data localization specifically because of the developments of legislation in India. We have significantly expanded our local presence to support customers, of course, which specifically require local data storage, but we do seek Indian government support in allowing cross-border data flows, exactly to ease digital businesses. And when it comes to recommendations for AI specifically, just to finish, I promise. The first point, a separate focus area on business AI as a distinct one from consumer AI, because here we see a complete difference. As a B2B company, we see that very often it gets mixed up in different approaches, in different legislations. And maybe a separate track in the upcoming AI Impact Summit can be hosted by the government of India, and we are happy to support you with that. And the points on AI and common discussions between EU and India, responsible AI framework. So the EU already has a high standard with the AI Act, and also SAP has our AI ethics principles already existent as of 2018, and they became the internal policy, which is applied by our developers. Then standards and certification, as I mentioned, harmonization in certifications for cybersecurity, for procurement, mutual recognition agreements. This is something that could be looked into. R&D also mentioned. We do support cooperation between India and the EU to promote joint partnerships and again secure data sharing frameworks. And regulatory audits. We do see this problem also within the EU, lack of recognition between different authorities. This would also help a lot if we find agreements between different authorities when it comes to audits and validation of our compliance with different laws. Thank you.
Sounds good. That was all a very long laundry list of things, and I think they're all very important. I would now like to go to MeitY to sort of take us a bit outside the technical and industrial realms of the potential partnership. MeitY leads the Indo-Pacific program at Klingendahl Institute. Klingendahl is known to be one of the leading voices on foreign affairs, on geopolitics. And so I would love to hear from you on why this moment is actually super important to sort of increase the collaboration. And from a sort of geopolitical perspective, how does this matter to both Europe and India?
Thanks, Gautam, and thanks for putting together such a fantastic program. I'm genuinely sad not to be able to be with you in Brussels today, but thanks for facilitating this. There was some technical issues, some of the speakers that were not speaking into the mic as much as others. I couldn't hear as well, so apologies if this is on some fronts repetitive. But indeed, I think it's important for us also to take a step back and to look at why all of this is important. And we know that there's a lot of discussion ongoing between the EU and India. But at Klingendahl, indeed, we have an Indo-Pacific program that I'm in charge of, but also tech and digitalization and the geopolitics of that. So I'm trying to combine, because I do believe that tech and digitalization is one of the key areas of interest for all of us in working with countries in the Indo-Pacific, and of course India as a leader in that region. So we look at Digital Global Gateway, which is of course Europe's proposition to other parts of the world. And that involves also many projects that are in the digital space. And I'm very much hoping, and we're actually preparing a new study on trusted AI partnerships. That could be one element in Digital Global Gateway, which where I think EU and India can very much collaborate. And I'll elaborate on a little bit on specifically the approach I think that we have to offer to many countries in the world, because we very much genuinely share an interest in open source. That I think we need to continue to highlight and continue to invest in ourselves in developing it, co-creating this, and then bringing that to other parts of the world. So that's one element. Also, digital sovereignty. We know, of course, India is aiming for or is building a sovereign AI. Which is part of a bigger effort at becoming what we in Europe would call economically secure, economic security, digital autonomy. These are, I think, terms and concepts that we hear a lot in both India and EU and different member states. And this is really where I think is one of the most powerful driving factors behind this new field of collaboration between us two. And that's, of course, because we both see challenges in the supply chain. We both see challenges with, getting the raw materials that we all need. And we all both want to build competitiveness in these fields. And we can really collaborating, doing some of that more jointly will really help both sides. But the devil is, of course, always in the details. So where exactly do we align and where do we also see perhaps some challenges and that we hopefully can overcome if we get to know each other a little bit better. Because frankly speaking, I see a lot of one-off meetings in EU-India ties, but I think we really need the more sustained, regular meetings at all different levels. And we know, of course, that, for example, in high-performance computing, there's already some interesting stuff happening on research. There's this Ganana project where the EU and India are already collaborating. So there's definitely some good news to share here. But I think we really need to deepen many and have many more instances where we get together for jointly addressing opportunity or share challenges and reaping opportunities. And just to mention the elephant in the room, of course, dealing with the United States is for both of us a challenge. I don't think we can not mention this. At the same time, we are all very aware that especially in this field of AI and tech, the US, we cannot do without the US. So knowing that, and that especially the US has a great advantage over everybody else on compute, we know we need to continue working with the United States, but also coordinating how we can collaborate in making sure that we continue to benefit in that relationship, and that it's not us being sort of thrown under the bus of American companies that are so powerful and that manage to really attract many of our citizens' attention and data, and using that to innovate further. I think both India and the EU want to take a greater share of the pie, and I think we can be more powerful if we more closely align on this sort of element of dealing with the United States.
No, this is a great segue to sort of the challenges section of this panel. Thank you, Micah. I think you made two very, very important points. I think one is that we need to have a lot more of these interactions that are ongoing. Just so everyone is aware, we are trying to put together a proposal along with Klingendal and several other think tanks to try to have a track 1.5 or track 2 dialogue once the TTC process sort of gets broader and deeper and more engaged. The second very important point you made was along this lines of digital sovereignty. This is sort of the buzzword of Brussels these days, and I think there's a very important reason for it. It's because AI is going to be so disruptive. It will be much more sort of much more important to have more control over than even the platform economy that we have now. One of the very important words that Secretary used in your remarks was, we are going to look for a techno-legal approach. You also said third way, which I think is exactly the kind of stuff that we should base the EU-India partnership and relationship on. Because at the end, the question of de-risking really applies to both parties, and it's not just a US problem per se. It's also the other big superpower in the room, the Chinese, who are also extremely active on AI. So the question is, how does Europe and India look at this question of digital sovereignty, but at the same time stay open enough to collaborate with each other? And I think this is sort of the backdrop of a lot of these discussions. And I would love to hear, Juha, your take on this issue. How do we get sovereign AI without closing the doors?
Thanks very much. Yes, very good question. I was very pleased to hear the Secretary Krishnan used the word third way, because it is also a term that I've used myself a lot of the times in these international contexts. And so I
ask you to speak in the microphone a bit more. Sorry to interrupt.
Sorry. I'll try to keep that in mind. Yeah, so I've used that term also in the international context, so I feel honored to be in such excellent company with that use of choice of words. So I don't think, that issue of sovereignty and international cooperation they are not mutually exclusive. And certainly we in the European Union, we are open to cooperation. We have shown that also with our past actions, and we are doing that. The Apply AI strategy is, of course, now the policy document which outlines the steps we are taking also in this regard to support sovereignty. I should point out, however, it also has a section on international cooperation, and we do think that is important going forward also. But for us, of course, we want to ensure that we have the know-how, the necessary know-how and the resources to develop AI and to benefit from AI, to reap the benefits of this technology and its power. And that's why we are then, having this sectoral approach in the Apply AI strategy. We have 10 strategic sectors and the public sector. By the way, the public sector is perhaps something where we could also, this is what I learned earlier this week, an area where we could cooperate. India is very advanced in this regard in many ways. And we think that maybe there is something that we could also learn from India in this regard, and that could be a sector. But that's one of the sectors in the Apply AI strategy. We want to emphasize it. We want to boost these sectors, the adoption of AI in these sections, and of course, we build on the compute and resources and infrastructure that we are building as part of our program. So we want to enhance our competitiveness. We want to support our technological sovereignty in this regard. So AI adoption, very important, innovation across Europe, facilitate the integration of AI in different sectors, unlock the social benefits of AI, and to strengthen the capabilities. And we're also sort of looking into, this is also mentioned in the Apply AI strategy, into a frontier AI initiative to have the necessary frontier AI capacity, the research and excellence that we need in that regard. So there is, of course, a lot in the pipeline for that, but we don't see this as something which will, exclude us from cooperation. We don't see this as something which would prevent us from cooperating and working together with our partners. We think it's important to stay open. Many of the challenges that we face, of course, don't stop at the borders of a union or a single country, and that's why we need partners. And we're very pleased to see that India is very active on the international scene in many ways. The summit is just one example of that. Previously, India was also chairing the Global Partnership on AI. So in many ways, India has been active, and this is something that we very much welcome.
Sounds good. I think personally that sovereignty is a question that, or an issue that gets sort of appropriated by different interests, and it means different things to different people in a different context. And so it's very important to get that clarity on sovereignty doesn't necessarily mean autarky or sort of closing off our stack. The other thing that's super important in sort of the challenges sphere of AI and the emergence of AI is this security aspect. It is an open technology. There's a lot of scope for cybersecurity challenges. We were sort of discussing this earlier, Vidya. The Indian approach to this techno-legal way of regulating can be very useful to actually address also technical challenges that arise. One of the things I was thinking about was how this conversation on DPI and the India stack has now become the Euro stack conversation to some extent, where you have this movement which is basically inspired by the thinking that the Indian government had many years ago on laying out the digital infrastructure as a stack. So now coming to the question, Vidya, if you look at the AI stack, we have obviously the compute and the sort of the energy, the chips, the data centers, the software infrastructure, the foundation models. But then you have now the applications that are sort of taking off. And I guess the question now, the new foundation model providers are also releasing these browsers that are able to have what they call AI agents. AI agents sort of represents this new evolution of the stack, if you will. So there's a new kind of technology where people have to see whether or not AI can talk to AI and make decisions without the human in the loop. So I guess the question is, from a cybersecurity perspective, how do you see this new evolution? What are the challenges? What could we do better, etc.?
So I'll start by indeed endorsing the point that tech sovereignty doesn't mean tech isolation, and there is huge amount of space here to collaborate. And indeed, both the entities, whether it's the EU or India, are facing the same pressures, geopolitical pressures, and their attempts to secure an economic future in a very competitive world. And I think it's interesting to just take a moment to reflect on the LLMs that are being developed, homegrown, trained on local data sets in local languages, which are contextual and also feeding. I'll come to your point on de-risking in a second, but just wanted to make this point on culturally relevant models. And if they are open source, of course, the security of these models also has to be taken into account. And then you have these local models, LLMs, that could feed into sector specific. So if you would take agriculture, which is of enormous importance to the Indian economy, as well as in Europe, the idea that you could have a general purpose AI LLM, which can look at unstructured data, the weather data, and the soil data, etc., in combination with analytical AI, with the usual predictive analysis, etc. And this combination in a contextual way could go a long way in supporting the needs in both these regions. And on these kind of things, I think emerge new collaboration areas. If you look at, and there are others, public services, as you have just mentioned, which we talked about earlier as well. On de-risking, yes, I mean, Gen AI is set to explode in terms of adoption 5 times by 2030, according to some analysts. And similarly, agentic will follow soon. We know the problems with the Gen AI data leakage, hallucinations where outcomes are fabricated, and attacks such as prompt injections. And in agentic, you have where AI agents are basically operating autonomously. You've got the problems or the challenges of autonomous drift, where agents can go beyond the scope of what they are asked to do. There can be collusion between agents and go beyond the mandate that they are given. So this is an area that we are looking into, and the way we approach it is talking about de-risking AI by putting forward frameworks. And here I have to come back to the point that my colleague just made strongly in the parliament, that regulations by themselves, there's a lot of talk about regulations here in the EU. Regulations by themselves are really important. We wouldn't have safe water and air and the highest food quality in the world here in the EU without regulations. But regulations that are complex and cost a lot to comply with, that's the problem. And that's where indeed technology, as Secretary Krishnan also pointed out, could play an important role in actually helping to comply. So the whole idea of EU AI Act being a kind of an evolutionary act, which can also make the space, and also the Indian version of it, which I'm sure is in the making, will make space to also adopt and provide space to govern. And this governance is really required. We as a technology player endorse it strongly to also prevent the problems that new, versions of AI like agentic AI bring forward.
That's I think very important feedback. This is probably something that the EU should work on moving forward as a way to plug the gap, if you will, that arises. But luckily, the AI Act is pretty flexible in that sense, and so there's room for this. I would now love to open it up to the audience, since this is a policy dialogue. So if you have any questions, please raise your hands, and please introduce yourself and where you're from as well.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Tanveer Ahmed. I work with the European Automobile Manufacturers Association. We represent the interests of EU automotive manufacturers with the institutions. Special thanks to all the panelists and all the participants. I have a couple of questions. First to the panel, particularly to the Commission, is we know that the AI Act has a specific section on high-risk AI. How is India and the EU through the TTC cooperating on, say, testing and certification standards? Because speaking from the automotive sector's perspective is that with the emergence of AI, we have ADAS systems emerging that are resulting in autonomous vehicles being driven. So in case we have to cooperate and have similar cars present in India and the EU, what kind of regulatory frameworks are present? And second question, if I may, to a non-panelist, which is the Secretary Krishnan, is going a step back from AI towards semiconductors and chips. The automotive industry is currently facing an issue or a problem, if I say, with the Nexperia going around, this particular company being banned from. So everybody's nodding it, so you know the issues. How can India, with the help of its prowess in skills and semiconductor manufacturing through Foxconn and other plants that are present, help ensure that EU supply chains in the long term are not disrupted by one player, and they have the ability to diversify and reach out to more strategic partners such as India, so the auto industry is not affected in the long run? Thank you very much.
Do you wanna address that first, Secretary, and then if you don't mind?
No, I think, thank you. Very important question and very important point that you made there. And this is part of India's ambition in the semiconductor space, that to create that resilient and sustainable supply chain, so that there is an alternative which is available there to single manufacturers. So that is what India's basic goal is. And a lot of what we are attempting to do also partly comes from the experience that we had during the COVID pandemic in terms of especially automobile chips not being available. And the area we are focusing on right now in the semiconductor mission is precisely those nodes. We are not going into the, leading edge nodes, the much smaller nodes. We are in the nodes which are primarily of much wider consumption, including automobile chips. And the first of our foundries, which hopefully in about a year and a half's time would be commencing manufacture, the Tata's foundry in Dholera, will focus on this area, and most of the packaging activity, because we have already approved 10 companies who are in this area of production, and therefore that is precisely the gap we are willing to look at and we are wanting to look at. The other part of the story, which is very significant and something that later this afternoon I hope to raise, is that the number of European companies who have been, we are of course collaborating with NXP, not Nexperia directly, but NXP is a company we are working with. Infineon is another company we are working with. So in the semiconductor space, there is work we are doing. I spent time with IMEC yesterday. We are working closely with IMEC. This year's Semicon conference, which was held in India, we had ASML attending, and we had a number of other European companies present. So there's a lot of interest, but so far there's not been a concrete set of actions. But interestingly enough, I think more will happen in the days to come. We are supporting one of NXP's endeavors of actually creating modules in the designing modules, and they have a fairly big design outfit in India currently, and more of it is sort of coming together. Siemens is another European company which is active in India. Of course, SAP is a company which is active in a different space, and they're also talking to us as to how to get into the data center space in India. So there's been a range of areas where there have been very promising leads with European companies, but we'd like to see a much deeper engagement and actual investment take place so that we really do create these diversified supply chains, which I think is extremely critical for the whole world, not just for India, but for everybody else.
Do you want to add any comments?
Just on the first part of the question quickly. So we now have actually the conditions in place to start discussing AI safety with the AI Safety Institute in India. And of course, the importance of AI safety has increased also over the past couple of years quite significantly. So that is certainly something that is of interest to us, as I mentioned previously, and as was also mentioned, obviously, by Secretary Krishnan. As regards standards, the standardization work, as you will know, is being done in the International Standardization Organization. So although the European Commission has an important role in requesting standards, and of course for the AI Act, we have a request for a set of standards, that work is done then in that context. And of course, as mentioned already by Secretary Krishnan, India is active also in that context. For the AI Act, of course, we can, although we have a specific request for standards, we can also adopt international standards if they are fit for purpose, for the purpose of the AI Act to fulfill the conditions for that.
Thank you. There's a question there. Perfect.
Hello. Okay. Thank you very much. Bengusu from Center for Future Generations. We're a think tank based out here in Brussels. So thank you very much, first of all, bringing everybody together. So as Mr. Krishnan mentioned, this is actually a continuation of summits from Bletchley. And while it is indeed a progression from safety, safety, action, and impact, we can also question whether the agendas have also been involved. So if we look into actually the safety summit, it was quite focused on the safety and security of the most advanced general purpose AI models, and whether there is still an international coordination and collaboration as that summit actually intended, it's a question mark. Even though it is actually one of the themes in the summit, there is not much emphasis as it was in the previous summit. So if we actually try to also kind of look back and see how we can achieve tractability across the summits, and obviously you need all the audience from that summit in the room. And right now we are maybe missing the developers of the most advanced AI models, and most of them are in the US or in China. So it's also a question mark, how much of representation is there from these countries? Looking into the current engagement, I think the EU AI Office especially is one of the leading maybe institutions with the EU AI Office focusing on AI safety research and investing in this. So I'm curious how much India and EU are planning to invest in security and safety of frontier AI models, the general purpose AI models that are highly capable. Both actors actually mentioned open source being very important. If you look into 2 to 3 years from now, the most advanced open source models will either be quite behind the private models, or if we try to advance open source as well, then the risks of open source models will also be quite amplified. So would investment towards technical guardrails for open source models, would this be an interest for India AI Safety Institute and EU AI Office, for instance?
So that's a great question. And if I may add a little bit to that question, I would also love to hear your take on how international collaboration is going on a broad sense, because you were part of the Hiroshima process and you have a great view on how this is evolving. So I would love to hear your thoughts on this.
So on AI safety cooperation, so there is a network of AI safety and security institutes. The cooperation is going on in that context. This is a product of the Bletchley Summit, and that was set up then basically in the following summit in Seoul, and that cooperation is going on. For our EU interest, we of course then want to cooperate bilaterally with countries which are maybe not involved in that safety institute, or also in addition to the multilateral cooperation also bilaterally. So that is certainly something that is of importance to us. I can't put any numbers on the investment or the cooperation in that regard, and as I mentioned earlier already, this is something that is set to begin then between India and the EU now that the conditions are in place for that. Overall, the international cooperation, I think what we do witness is an increase in the number of forums where international cooperation is discussed. It's a relatively crowded landscape in many ways, but what I think overall is very commendable is that these discussions are involving more and more countries now. So the Hiroshima AI process started as a G7 process. It has now expanded as the Hiroshima AI Friends group, where Japan has been very active. We are involved in that as well, the European Union. And it has involved many players then well beyond G7, also less developed countries. So that's a good example. Of course, there are more and more discussions going on in the UN context. So the Global Digital Compact has also a section on AI. So in that sense, we see a broader participation in the international conversation.
Any more questions from the audience, maybe?
Yeah, I think 2 quick points just to add to the response to the earlier question. I think it's not to underemphasize AI safety at all. I don't think that is the intent. The intent is that it's multidimensional, and the push towards AI, which can be used for productive purposes and towards productive ends, is also one of the ways in which you safeguard, because then you're not focusing as much on the other areas which could lead to other problematic developments. And again, in the case of the AI summit in Impact Summit in Delhi, there would be participation from other players as well, especially from the United States and a number of the companies and other stakeholders, because it is ultimately a multi-stakeholder approach. So they would be participating in the event, and we expect that all of these issues will certainly be addressed. That is the second point. And the last point is, as was pointed out, through the UN process as well. Many of these issues are getting seriously addressed, and a number of countries are now active in this entire process, and the network of AI safety institutes is something which will really take off, and that's one of the areas which we discuss closely with the EU as well. So I think to that extent, I would like to emphasize that it's not that safety is lost sight of, it is just that other areas are also being emphasized alongside. Coming to your question on when the governance framework is expected to come out, I think we've had our internal discussions. The whole thing has been approved. As soon as I go back to Delhi, probably next week sometime, we should get it out. Thank you.
Thanks for the newsworthy announcements in the event, but this is very good news. I think we're moving forward on both sides, which is very good news. Any other questions from the back? Anyone? All right. Sure. Yeah, maybe we collect two of them. Apologies for the tech.
Yeah. So you mentioned about research and innovation and the power of data for that. And we know that in the European Union, there's also the whole initiative from EC about the data spaces. Now, especially when we're talking about collaborating and sharing data between Europe and India, I'm interested to know, is there a practical step that we're going to take there, especially on smart cities, healthcare, and all these other domains that could be so much valuable between our two geographies? So just any views on that would be
That's a great question. That's a great question. We'll pick one more, and I will add to this question as well for you, Yuva.
Thank you. Konrad Helminger from the Effective Institutions Project. I'm also a PhD student focusing on international cooperation, although I'm mostly attending and speaking in a personal capacity here. So through my work, I have some exposure to the US, to the AI governance debate in the United States, and an informal consensus there is that basically the only two jurisdictions that really matter are the United States and China. I think this is not set in stone, but what sometimes comes up as sort of a third way, to use a term that's also been used today here, would be a coalition of third countries, which sounds promising in theory. In practice, we already touched on the challenge of squaring the ambition for sovereignty with cooperation. But if such a coalition were to arise, I would assume that the EU and India would be maybe even the
front runners.
Yeah, the core of such a coalition.
Yeah.
And I think my question for especially attendance from the Indian side would be, what can people in the EU, be it on the official side or on the business side, do to be good partners to the Indian side?
I'm going to ask you to answer that, Vidya, because this is quite relevant for industry as well. But before that, Yuha, I just wanted to remind you of the previous question. There's a lot of non-personal data. If you read the data strategy in the EU, this is really the core of why it was there. And can we do something more practical to make it interoperable so that things like what the DGA, for example, tries to accomplish, which is to unlock this data that is held by governments, or the non-personal data side, how do we do this across borders?
Well, two things, and I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you. Firstly, I'm not in charge of data and data policy, so I would be ill-advised to preempt the colleagues who are in charge of this and their plans. And also, this is one of the things, secondly, which we are going to discuss this afternoon in the TTC meeting. So data obviously is on the agenda, just as AI. they are not obviously completely orthogonal or separated, but just want to make sure that that is understood. As regards business data, that is important, of course, with industrial data. We have mentioned many. This is what Marta said. I think it's very important to understand that there is more to AI than just business to consumer AI. There's also a very significant part which is business to business. There's business to business space, and AI there has a big role to play. And this is actually something where the European Union and European companies like SAP are very strong. That is just not so visible at all in that regards. People talk about the business to consumer space and personal data most of the time, but there is more to AI than that.
And Vidya, what should we request the European Commission to do more so that this collaboration gets better, as the question was, if I understood that correctly?
I understood the question is also how industry can support forming a third way governance model. So I mentioned that a little bit in the beginning when I spoke. I think we are pretty much engaged at an industry level, working with compliance to the EU AI Act through our assessment models and through doing assessments on compliance and then risk mitigation strategies. So at an industry level, we are in fact implementing the EU AI Act, and the learnings of those can be shared, of course, across the borders, and we are sharing that as we speak. So that is engaging in the policy, presenting, as we did this week, some of the learnings as to how AI has been evolving, how fast AI has been is being deployed. The percentages are a bit lower, as Secretary Krishnan pointed out. It's the inverse of in India. So how and in which sectors it is being deployed, and what are the barriers to it. We try to provide our insights in that, and to show that how companies are now in Europe especially having the appetite to get into AI factories where gated use cases are being explored. So those industry insights are some things that we can bring to the table to add to what could be a good, better governance framework for AI.
All right. On that note, I think we are at time, and there is very, very good food in that room behind. Apologies to Micah. Next time you should travel to Brussels to enjoy the chai and the Indian snacks that everyone else can enjoy shortly. So thank you very much, first of all, to all our speakers, to the Secretary, to the Indian Embassy, for really creating the first of hopefully many such interactions. And we're all very excited at ECDPM because we hope to be part of this track 1.5, track 2 that will be launched eventually once the ministerial happens in a short while. So with that, thank you very much again, and hope you all have a very nice weekend. And please stay on to eat the really good food and the chai. Thanks.